What's up, guys? It's Daniel with Hungry Wolf Outdoors, and today we're making a video on how to make a knife out of these car strut springs. I got one of these from my auto shop, and it's pretty decently thick. I think it's about a 1/4 inch thick in the on the top here, and then once you get down here in the middle, it's about a 1/2 inch thick. What we're gonna do is we're gonna pound this out and kind of make a paring / skinning style knife out of this thing for bushcraft and do whatever. This stuff is good steel. It's basically like a people make knives out of leaf springs. I figure car strut spring, pretty much the same metal. It's pretty similar to 5160 from what I've seen from on the internet. So we're gonna throw this in the forge I got cooking up here. We're gonna hammer it out, and we'll go down the shop, do some stock removal grinding on it. Probably put a paracord or a leather wrap on it. At the end of the day, we should have a pretty decent knife coming out of it. So what I do here first is set it down, grab my angle grinder. We're gonna cut off a chunk of here. Always wear some sort of eye equipment when you're using with these things. Don't wear gloves. I wear fingerless gloves because otherwise your hand will get sucked in the machine and it'll get cut off. It's not good. So we're going to probably make this knife, I think probably around an 8-inch long knife. We're going to flatten this thing out. So I'll probably cut it just long enough that it'll fit my forge. Make sure you don't catch your pants on fire like I just did. What we got here for my forge setup, we'll bring the camera over here. So my forge is basically just a paint can that I have full of charcoal. Take the shop vac. All I've done to modify the shop vac, so I've taken a metal piece of pipe with a garden hose up to the actual blower. Or shove it in here, blow on it. Probably be pretty noisy, so you won't be able to hear what I'm going on. Basically gonna fill this up until it gets glowing hot. Throw the metal in there with a pair of pliers, and then we'll get going. So now we basically got the thing in the forge getting red hot. We're trying to get the middle red hot so we can pound it out and get it flat so it's not curved anymore. We can start hammering on it and getting the profile of the billet. Part of it right here is kind of tricky because it's still round and I don't have a pair of forge grips to do this with. Starting to get it straightened out a little bit. This is also burning off the rubber surface that was on it before. Oh, geez, guys, I'm kind of finicky here. So this is a railroad track connector or car connector from what I can understand. Which is what I'm using for my anvil. There we go. This guy all straightened out. And we'll hammer it out. So I'm going to throw it in the forge a couple times. Once I get this thing flat, I'll come back to you guys and show you where I get it from. Once it gets non-hot like this, you make sure you want to take it out of the you want to stop hammering on it. If you hammer on cold steel, you have the possibility of fracturing the grain of the steel, And it probably doesn't show up the color of the steel too good on camera, but once it loses its redness and it starts becoming more bouncy, and once you hit it with the hammer, it's not really doing much, just stop, then throw it back in the forge. It's not really worth the risk. Alrighty, almost there. Alrighty, so now this is what it looks like compared to what it was earlier. Alright, so the process we're going to start doing now is we're going to start flattening out this round into something more flat and square. So how we're going to do that is we're going to heat up pretty much all of it, get it flattened out. Then we'll kind of work on the shape after we get it flattened out. But for the most part, I just want to get this down to probably around 1/8 to 3/16 thick. Or sit here, get red hot, hammer on it, and try to get as flat as possible. When you do this, when I hammer on one side, turn it over, hammer on the other, get into a nice square, then hammer it out flat. You'll see this as I'm doing. I'm just going to try to give an explanation of what I'm doing now, that I don't have to talk over the blower. So after we do that, then we'll move on to kind of shaping the blade, which we'll do after we get a flattened billet. And if you don't know what a billet is a flat piece of steel that is used for knife making or anything else. It's basically when you see a square piece of stock steel, the billet is what you're actually making the knife out of. See how that's different now? Getting thinner in the middle. That's probably about the thickness I want to achieve. It's not going to be a real wide knife. Probably more like a skinning knife. Alrighty, so now you can kind of see the blade starting to take shape. So this is gonna be the handle. So what we want to do now is we're gonna leave this in the forge with the coal, the charcoal in it, and we're just gonna let it heat up in there and then cool slowly. So this will make it. We're gonna heat it up red hot again. Then we're just gonna leave it all in there, and that's annealing the blade. So when we get down there to the shop to do stock reduction, it's gonna be a lot easier to grind on. It's gonna be easier on my grinders, and that way we can also drill holes in it. Because if we left it in the state that it was already heat treated. You can't drill through that stuff without really expensive drill bits. So a cheap way to get around that is annealing the blade, making it soft by sticking it in the forge. And we're just gonna let it cool with it until it gets done. Kind of see the blade shape kind of. So right here is probably where the blade is probably gonna start forming, kind of curve up in the handle. I'm trying to decide between if I want to do a leather, maybe wood scales or something like that. But most of this stuff will get done. It should get flatter. The actual heat treat. This is just gonna be rough. You don't have to get it all perfect here. So this is gonna be the end to part one. I don't know if I'm gonna make this a full video or not. You'll tell if there's gonna be more video in the next 5 seconds. Alrighty guys, so I got the steel all cool off. It annealed. The thing is, it's a little bit too long for my hand. It'd be kind of awkward holding it like this. I put in that curve just a little too far up the blade. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna cut off probably around an inch off the back of it. I decided I'm going to do a paracord wrap, so it should be pretty easy from here. Alrighty. So now the knife, I think, fit the handle a little bit better. We're gonna curl it over, but now it's a little bit better knife shape. Alrighty, so now I got a grinding wheel on my angle grinder. I'm just gonna grind this thing to shape. It's really important that you get the part that's going to be the blade relatively flat, because if you don't, then there's going to be wiggles in your blade and it's just not going to cut right. Alright, so this is the blade now. It's starting to look a little bit more like a knife. I'm going to go over here and finish the final shaping on my 1x30. now the blade's all formed, I'm going to move on to working on the handle. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Alrighty, so here's the based out, roughed out knife blank. Now we're going to work on something called beveling. So beveling is when you take the blade and you grind it down to where it comes at kind of a point. So you want to have it a slant to whichever way. The steeper the slant, so the farther back it goes, the better the knife will cut. That way when you cut it, you don't have to come up here to cut, you can cut down here. If you ever have a knife that has dual grinds and stuff, it might be hard to cut here because the blade is angled here. So when you do this, you want to make sure you get it as close as possible and you just sweep it back and forth across the blade. Now this blade isn't heat treated, so we can get it decently hot and not have to worry about it, but afterwards, once we do heat treat, we'll have to watch out for it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to keep on doing these sweeping motions. You want to get it as close to the back, but you still want to give it a decent angle. So you're just going to sweep it until it gets even and the two tips almost meet in the middle. Now since we're going to heat treat this, you don't want to get it too close because that might cause warping in the forge, and then we'll grind on the rest later. So now you can kind of start to see how the blade is coming together. The tips, the edge is it's not perfect. Now it's not flat now. So this is why we're doing the rough shaping now while the steel is still annealed. While the steel is still annealed. That way it's easier to work with, it's easier on our belts and tools. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Now when we get this in the forge, we're going to flatten it out with a light hammer. That way it's nice and flat and perfect. But for right now, we're just going to try to get the rough grinds on here. So you can kind of see how it's helping here. We'll wait to do all of it until after we get on the anvil again and flatten it out. That way we don't remove material then have to remove more later. It just kind of defeats the point. I'm going to finish up grinding off this bevel. You can see it's kind of coming together to meet a tip or an edge. So I'll just keep on doing that. Alrighty guys, so now I'm just going to grab the blade. I have it in the forge getting red hot, and now I'm just going to take it, I'm going to lightly tap it with my hammer on the forge, on the anvil to make sure that it's all flat. We want to make sure that we normalize the blade, because what that does is it releases all the grain of the steel. And if we don't do that, all the hammering stuff, it'll make the steel really tight, and all the grain will be tight, and we don't want that, because otherwise when we quench it, it might crack and we'll have other problems with the blade. Alrighty, so now I've normalized the blade 3 times, and the next thing to do is get your blade up red hot, or to the point where it's non-magnetic, so when you stick it to a magnet, it will no longer stick to it. I do it mostly by eye, and I do it at night, that way I can see the steel. You want to get it really hot. It needs to be above critical temperature, which I believe is, I think around 1500, about 2000 degrees. It might be less, it might be more, don't quote me on it, look it up. But that's about my forge gets up to about 2000 degrees. So I generally like to get it up pretty hot. What I'm going to do is you're going to cut to a scene where you're going to see me quenching in an oil. I do an oil and water mixture, mostly it's because I left my quench pot open and oil got in it. I mean, the rain got in it when it was oil. So oil or water will work. It doesn't really matter. You just want to make sure you quench it hard and you quench it fast. So then it's going to be super hard. It's going to be like a file hard. And so then what we're going to do after that is we're going to take it into the house and put it in the oven and temper all that hardness out. That way it's not too brittle. So you'll cut to that, see me put it in there. I'm going to put it in the oven until I see it kind of turn bluish. I'll cut to some pictures of that. You'll kind of see where I'm going. Generally it takes me in my toaster oven, I put it about 500 degrees, and it takes me about an hour to get there. Alrighty guys, so what happened while I was forging it is that I got a call from the customer saying that he wanted a smaller blade. So I went ahead and shortened it up and reformed the tip and got all that. It's basically the same thing I did before. So now I'm going to finish putting on the edge. I already started doing it up here when I formed the tip. But what you want to do is if you want to leave this forged finish on, you just want to grind the end of it. You put the final edge on it. You want to grind it until it really forms an edge. And there's not really any way I can get a picture of that, but you want to get it to where if you hold it up to a light, you can't see any reflection of it. And just keep on doing it until you can cut something. You can cut it, like you can run it against the back of your thumbnail. If it starts to grab stuff, then you're getting to where you need to be. So I'm going to finish this up. I got a water bucket here because if it gets too warm, if it gets hot enough that you can't touch it now that it's heat treated, you can't have it get that hot. Alright, so now I got my edge all formed up, and the one thing you want to really make sure of is you want to run the grinder along the back of the tip just a little bit. And you want to get it to where it's pointy, because if you don't have a pointy knife, you end up using the tip way more than you think. Alrighty, so the blade is done, and we're just going to go put a cord wrap handle on it. I think I actually like it smaller. I think it kind of fits the width of the blade a little bit better than having a really big blade with a thin handle. Since we cut it off of a skinnier part of the spring, we can't really get it to be that long, because if you get a long skinny blade, you kind of lose a lot of functionality. So I'm happy that he chose this, because I just like it personally better. Alrighty guys, so here basically I've got a piece of bank line, and I'm basically just going to start wrapping this around. Bank line, you don't really have to do any knots with it because it's so skinny and so thin. You just want to take it around here and just wrap it around the blade as many times as you can. We can tie it off later, but basically you get the idea. You want to wrap it up so that gets each layer right behind the other, or each piece of rope right behind the other. So we're just going to do this, and we're probably going to do a couple layers of this, and when we get to the end we're just going to turn around and go straight back. Since this is thin, we have a nice thick handle. Alrighty guys, so here's a finished knife with a bank line handle. Not sure if you guys can see the handle too well, but I did a little pattern on it. I left the blade with the forge mark on it just because it generally looks pretty cool. Feels really nice in the hand. It's about just the right size. The customer already is buying it, so I couldn't really do much other than what he wanted with it, so I couldn't really show you guys everything that I wanted to. I'll be coming out with more videos. This is more just showing you that you can make a knife out of car strut springs, and there are plenty of more places that you can find usable knives and makeable knives in places that you wouldn't expect. So if you want to order a custom from me, I do use stock steel sometimes. I can order it for you, whatever you want. I do 100% customs. Whatever you want, I make it 100% to your order. Find me at facebook.com/hungrywolfoutdoors or email me at hungrywolfoutdoors@gmail.com. So there should be more videos in the future. This is my first knife making tutorial. So if you guys have any suggestions, videos you want to see, so leave it down in the comments or email me. I'll have a link to my Facebook account in the description. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Keep forge on.